Still single, Emily? I guess some things never change. Jason Miller's laugh carried farther than it needed to, cutting through the soft music and polished conversation of the Blackwood Foundation Gala. Emily Carter kept both hands steady beneath the silver serving tray, even as heat climbed into her cheeks. 3 years. 3 years since Jason had walked out of their tiny apartment and told her he wanted someone who was going somewhere. Apparently, becoming successful had not taught him kindness. Good to see you too, Jason, Emily said quietly. His friends smiled into their champagne glasses. Emily turned away. She had 12 tables left, 4 hours remaining on her shift, and exactly $68 in her checking account. Pride did not pay rent. Arguments did not buy groceries. So she walked. The ballroom glittered around her, all crystal chandeliers, black marble, and dresses worth more than her yearly income. Outside, Manhattan disappeared beneath cold November rain. Inside, people whispered about billionaires, old families, and the mysterious guest seated alone at the most important table in the room. Emily had noticed him earlier. Everyone had. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit and no tie. His dark hair swept back from a face so pale it seemed carved from winter itself. He had not touched his champagne. He had barely spoken. Yet powerful people kept approaching him with careful smiles and leaving with lowered eyes. Emily assumed he was another billionaire. New York had plenty of those. Emily. Jason's voice followed her. She stopped. Bad decision. What? He glanced at her plain black uniform, then toward the elegant woman holding his arm. I heard you're still waiting tables. And still alone? His smile sharpened. Come on. You can admit I was right. You always wanted some impossible fairy tale. A few nearby conversations faded. Emily felt the attention gathering and hated him for knowing exactly how much she hated being watched. I'm working, Jason. I'm just saying, maybe your standards were the problem. Emily swallowed the answer burning behind her teeth. She would not give him a scene. She would not let him turn 3 difficult years into entertainment. She lifted her chin. Then I hope you found exactly what you were looking for. She stepped around him. Jason moved into her path again. Wait. At least tell us there's someone. Emily stared at him. His friends were listening now. So were several strangers. Across the ballroom, the pale man at the VIP table slowly raised his eyes. No, Emily said. There isn't. Jason laughed. I knew it. Then a chair moved across marble. The sound was soft. Somehow, the entire room heard it. The stranger stood. Conversations died one by one as he crossed the ballroom with measured steps. Emily watched people move aside before he reached them. Something about him changed the air. Colder, quieter, older. He stopped beside her. Up close, his skin was even paler than she had realized, almost unnaturally white beside her own fair complexion, and his gray eyes held a stillness that made her forget the room around them. Jason frowned. Can I help you? The stranger ignored him. Instead, he pulled out the empty chair beside his own table and looked at Emily as though he had been expecting her all evening. Then his gaze shifted to Jason. You wanted to know whether she has someone. His voice was low, calm, absolute. Jason gave an uncertain laugh. And you are? The stranger did not answer. He simply extended one hand toward Emily. Every person in the ballroom seemed to stop breathing. Emily stared at that hand, then at the man she was certain she had never met before. His expression remained unreadable. Jason scoffed. What exactly is she to you? For the first time, something almost human flickered in the stranger's silver-gray eyes. He looked directly at Emily. Then he spoke 2 words that turned the entire ballroom silent. My wife. Emily forgot how to breathe. For one impossible second, she wondered whether she had misunderstood him, but Jason's stunned expression told her she had heard perfectly. Your wife, Jason repeated. The stranger remained beside Emily, calm enough to make everyone else seem nervous. Was I unclear? He asked. Jason opened his mouth, then closed it. Emily finally found her voice. Excuse me, but I think you have the wrong woman. The stranger looked at her, and something unreadable passed through his silver-gray eyes. Emily Carter, he said. Her stomach dropped. She had never told him her name. How do you know that? He did not answer. Instead, his gaze lowered briefly toward the thin, silver chain visible above the collar of her uniform. Emily instinctively touched it. Hidden beneath the fabric was an old pendant her grandmother had left her, a small black stone surrounded by a faded silver crest. She had worn it every day since she was 16. The stranger's expression changed for less than a heartbeat. Recognition. Then it vanished. We should speak privately, he said. Absolutely not. Emily stepped back. You know my name. You just told a room full of strangers that I am your wife. And now you want me to follow you somewhere? For the first time, the corner of his mouth almost moved. A reasonable objection. Jason recovered enough courage to laugh. This is ridiculous. Emily probably arranged this whole thing. That erased whatever amusement had appeared in the stranger's face. He turned toward Jason. You believe she arranged for me to be here? I do not even know who you are. A strange silence followed. Somewhere near the orchestra, a champagne glass touched a tray with a tiny crystalline sound. Then an elderly man in a midnight blue tuxedo hurried toward them. Emily recognized him immediately. Charles Whitmore, the billionaire whose foundation hosted the gala. She had seen his photograph in the employee briefing that afternoon. Whitmore stopped several feet from the stranger and lowered his head. Your Majesty. Jason's smile disappeared. Emily stared at him. What did you call him? Nobody answered her. Around the ballroom, elegant men and women began lowering their heads. Some bowed. Others placed a hand over their hearts. The movement spread across the room like a silent wave until nearly everyone remained motionless except Emily and Jason. Emily looked from face to face, waiting for someone to laugh. No one did. Your Majesty? Jason whispered. Charles Whitmore finally looked at him. You are standing before Alexander Blackwood. His voice had lost all warmth. King of the Night Court. Emily almost laughed because the alternative was believing him. Vampires were rumors people joked about after midnight. Old Manhattan legends. Stories about families who never appeared in daylight, photographs and fortunes that seemed to survive for centuries. Then Alexander turned toward her, and his eyes were no longer gray. A faint crimson light moved through them like embers beneath winter glass. Emily's fingers tightened around her tray. Jason took one slow step backward. Alexander paid him no attention. He was watching Emily's hand. More precisely, he was watching the pendant beneath it. Where did you get that? He asked. Emily hesitated. My grandmother. The room became impossibly still. Her name? Rose Carter. Alexander's face changed. Not shock. Something deeper. Something ancient suddenly remembering. He moved one step closer, then stopped carefully beyond her reach. Emily, he said, quieter now. We have met before. She shook her head. I would remember you. You did not see this face. Rain tapped softly against the ballroom windows. Emily stared at him, and somewhere inside her memory, another rainy night began to stir. A deserted street. A stranger beneath a dark coat. A voice she had almost forgotten. Alexander looked at the pendant once more. But I remember yours. The memory returned in pieces. Cold rain. A nearly empty street in Queens. A broken streetlight flickering above a bus stop. Emily had been walking home after covering another server's shift when she noticed a man sitting alone beneath the shelter, wrapped in a dark coat, his face hidden beneath the shadow of a hood. She had almost kept walking. New York taught people to mind their own business. But something about the stranger had stopped her. He looked exhausted. Not drunk. Not asleep. Simply tired in a way she understood. Emily stared at Alexander now, and the ballroom seemed to disappear around her. That was you, she whispered. Alexander gave the smallest nod. 6 months earlier, she had approached the stranger carefully and asked whether he needed help. He had answered that he needed nothing. She had almost believed him until she noticed his hands trembling from the cold. Emily had only $14 in her wallet that night, but she had crossed the street, bought hot coffee and a turkey sandwich from a 24-hour deli, then returned and placed both beside him. You never touched the food, Emily remembered. No, I thought you were homeless. A faint warmth entered Alexander's expression. You apologized because the coffee only had 1 packet of sugar. Emily stared at him. She had never told anyone that detail. Why were you there? That explanation requires more time than we have. His eyes shifted toward the watching ballroom. And considerably more privacy. Jason gave a nervous laugh behind them. So she bought you coffee once, and now she is your wife? Several guests visibly stiffened. Alexander remained still. No, Emily turned sharply toward him. Then why did you say it? His silence lasted 1 second too long. Because Jason was humiliating you. I can defend myself. I know. The answer came immediately. No arrogance. No mockery. Just certainty. Somehow that unsettled her more. Then why? Alexander lowered his voice. Because there are people in this room who noticed you before Jason did. Emily glanced around. Faces turned away too quickly. What does that mean? Your pendant. Her fingers closed around the stone beneath her collar. Alexander continued. When you entered this ballroom, 3 members of the night court recognized its crest. It belonged to my grandmother. That is what concerns me. Emily pulled the pendant free. The black stone rested against her palm, ordinary and familiar. Yet several guests across the room immediately stepped back. Her heartbeat quickened. What is it? Alexander looked at the crest. Something that should not exist anymore. Jason scoffed, apparently deciding disbelief was safer than fear. This is insane. Vampires, kings, magical jewelry. Emily, you cannot seriously believe this. He reached toward the pendant. Alexander's voice changed. Do not touch it. 3 words. Quiet. Absolute. Jason froze before his hand came close. Alexander did not move toward him. He did not need to. Charles Whitmore appeared beside Jason and politely guided him away from Emily. Perhaps you should enjoy the remainder of the gala elsewhere, Mr. Miller. Jason looked around for support and found none. His confidence collapsed into embarrassed silence. Emily should have felt satisfied. Instead, she felt trapped inside a question that kept growing larger. She turned back to Alexander. You still have not explained why you called me your wife. Because under the oldest laws of my court, it was the fastest way to place you under my protection. Emily's eyes narrowed. So it was a lie. Alexander looked at her for a long moment. It was supposed to be. Something cold moved through the room. Emily looked down. The black stone in her palm had begun to glow. The glow was faint at first, no brighter than moonlight beneath dark water, but every vampire in the ballroom reacted as though a forgotten bell had begun ringing. Emily stared at the pendant resting against her palm. For 16 years it had been nothing more than the last thing her grandmother gave her. Now thin silver lines were appearing across the black stone, forming a symbol she had never seen before. Alexander. Her voice came out quieter than she intended. He was already watching it. For the first time since crossing the ballroom, the vampire king looked genuinely unsettled. Put it beneath your collar. Why? Because everyone here can see it. Emily glanced toward the guests. The elegant curiosity from moments earlier was gone. Some looked astonished. Others looked afraid. One woman near the staircase whispered something to her companion, and Alexander's expression hardened immediately. Emily, he said, please. That word surprised her more than any command could have. She closed her fingers around the pendant and tucked it beneath her uniform. The glow disappeared behind the fabric, but the tension remained. Alexander offered his hand again. Come with me. Emily did not take it. You said calling me your wife placed me under your protection. Protection from what? His gaze moved across the ballroom. Questions I would prefer you did not have to answer tonight. That is not an answer. No, it is not. He lowered his hand. But it is the truth. Emily studied him. Ancient king or not. She had spent too many years letting other people decide what information she could handle. Then tell me enough to make my own decision. Something shifted in Alexander's face. Approval, perhaps. Your grandmother's pendant bears the crest of a royal house that disappeared more than 2 centuries ago. Emily almost smiled from disbelief. My grandmother lived in a 2-bedroom house in Pennsylvania and clipped grocery coupons. Both things can be true. Before Emily could respond, Charles Whitmore approached. His face had gone pale. Your Majesty, the council representatives are requesting clarification. Alexander did not look away from Emily. They can request until sunrise. They heard your declaration. I am aware. Charles hesitated. Then they will consider Miss Carter protected under royal law. Emily folded her arms. Good. At least someone is finally explaining things. Charles looked as though he wished he were anywhere else. Alexander almost smiled. Almost. Then Emily noticed Jason standing 20 feet away near the ballroom doors, speaking rapidly to a woman in a silver gown. The woman was listening with unsettling interest. Jason pointed toward Emily. What is he doing? She asked. Alexander followed her gaze, trying to recover his pride. He knows things about me. Alexander's eyes returned to hers. Things you fear I might hear. Emily's shoulders tightened. Things people enjoy turning into weapons. Alexander was silent for a moment. Then let them speak. Emily blinked. You do not even know what they are. I know what you did when you believed I was a stranger with nothing to offer you. Rain whispered against the tall windows. That tells me more about you than gossip ever could. Before Emily could answer, the woman in silver raised her champagne glass and called across the ballroom, "Your Majesty, before you grant royal protection to Emily Carter, perhaps you should know why her former fiancé left her." Every face turned. Jason looked suddenly pleased. Emily went cold. Alexander did not look at the woman. He looked only at Emily. "Do you want to leave?" he asked. She could have. Instead, Emily slowly removed her serving apron, placed it on the nearest table, and lifted her chin. No, something ancient and approving awakened in Alexander's crimson eyes. "Good," he said softly. "Then let them learn what happens when they mistake dignity for weakness." The woman in silver smiled as if she had been waiting all evening for this moment. "Perhaps Miss Carter would like to explain the debt," she said. A murmur moved through the ballroom. Emily felt the old shame arrive exactly as Jason intended. 3 years earlier, her mother had become seriously ill, and Emily had emptied her savings trying to keep their small family afloat. She had missed rent, sold her car, worked mornings at a coffee shop and nights at a restaurant. When that still was not enough, she had borrowed money from Jason. He had called it help when they were together. After their relationship ended, he called it proof that she could never survive without him. "Go ahead," Jason said, suddenly confident again. "Tell them." Emily looked at him. "Tell them what?" "That you owed me $12,000. Several guests exchanged glances. Jason continued, louder now. "Tell them you were broke. Tell them you were working 3 jobs. Tell them I paid your bills." Emily felt every eye in the ballroom settle on her, but something inside her had changed. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was Alexander standing beside her without trying to speak for her. Or maybe she was simply tired of being ashamed of surviving. "Yes," Emily said. Jason blinked. "Yes, what?" "Yes, I borrowed money from you." Her voice remained steady. "My mother was sick. I was 24 years old, and I was trying to keep her apartment while paying for things insurance did not cover. You offered to help." Jason's smile weakened. "And you took it." "I did." Emily held his gaze. "Then I paid back every dollar." Silence. Jason looked toward his friends. "That is not the point." "Then what is?" Emily asked. "That I was poor? Everyone here already knows I am a waitress. That I worked 3 jobs? I am not embarrassed by work." Something shifted through the crowd. Not pity. Respect. Jason heard it too. "You always do this," he said. "Make yourself sound noble." Alexander finally spoke. "She has not made herself sound like anything." His voice was quiet, yet the room obeyed it. "She answered your accusation with the truth." The woman in silver lowered her glass. "Your Majesty, surely financial desperation matters when evaluating someone suddenly connected to the throne." Alexander turned his crimson gaze toward her. "Lady Evelyn, Emily did not know who I was when she helped me." He paused. "She believed I had nothing." No one spoke. "She gave me food she could barely afford. She offered me her umbrella and walked home through the rain because she believed I needed it more." Emily stared at him. She had forgotten the umbrella. Alexander had not. "That," he continued, "is the only evaluation of her character I require tonight." Jason's face tightened. "You met her once. You do not know her." Alexander looked at Emily rather than him. "Perhaps not yet." 2 simple words, but they landed differently. Not ownership. Not a claim. A possibility. Emily felt the pendant warm beneath her uniform. This time the sensation was stronger. She reached instinctively for the chain. Alexander noticed. So did Lady Evelyn. "Your Majesty," she whispered. The stone. A silver glow escaped between Emily's fingers. Then the chandeliers above them flickered. Across the ballroom, an ancient crest carved into the black marble wall began shining with the same pale light. Charles Whitmore stepped backward. Lady Evelyn's glass trembled in her hand. Alexander stared from the crest to Emily, and for the first time his ancient composure vanished completely. "That symbol has been dark for 217 years, he said. Emily slowly uncovered the pendant. The markings on the stone now matched the glowing crest exactly. "Alexander," she whispered, "what does this mean?" His answer came so softly that only those nearest them could hear. "It means your grandmother never told you who you were." Emily stared at Alexander, waiting for the sentence to become less impossible. It did not. "Who I was," she repeated. "I am Emily Carter. My grandmother raised me in Pennsylvania. My mother worked at a public library. There is no mystery." There is always a mystery when history has been deliberately erased, Lady Evelyn said. Alexander turned toward her, and the temperature in the ballroom seemed to fall. Enough. One word ended every whisper. He looked at Charles Whitmore. Clear the East Gallery. Charles nodded immediately. Of course, Your Majesty. Emily folded her arms. Nobody is clearing anything until someone tells me what that symbol means. Alexander studied her for a moment, then glanced toward the glowing crest on the marble wall. It belonged to House Veilheart, one of the oldest human families ever recognized by the Night Court. Emily almost laughed. Recognized for what? For standing between our worlds. Lady Evelyn answered before Alexander could. They were human, but ancient vampire law granted them authority equal to noble blood. Emily looked down at her pendant. That sounds impossible. So did I 10 minutes ago, Alexander said. She could not argue with that. He stepped toward the crest, but kept several feet between them. House Veilheart disappeared 217 years ago. Their estates were abandoned. Their records vanished. No confirmed descendant was ever found. Until tonight, Lady Evelyn whispered. Alexander's gaze sharpened. That has not been established. Emily noticed the distinction immediately. He was protecting her again, but this time not by claiming her. By refusing to let others define her before the truth was known. Jason, still near the doors, suddenly spoke. Her grandmother's last name was not Carter. Emily turned. Jason. He pulled out his phone. You told me once. Rose was married twice. Carter came from her second husband. Emily's stomach tightened. She had told him that years ago, during one of those late-night conversations when she still believed he would keep her memories safe. What was her original name? Lady Evelyn asked. Jason looked at Emily, enjoying the attention again. Vale. The room changed. Alexander became perfectly still. Emily heard her own heartbeat. Rose Vale. Jason continued. That was it. Alexander looked toward Charles. The archives. Charles nodded. Below the foundation building. Bring the Veilheart registry. Lady Evelyn stepped forward. Your Majesty, if she is truly descended from that house, your declaration carries consequences. Emily turned sharply. What consequences? Alexander's jaw tightened. Old law. You keep saying that as though it explains anything. It does to them. I am not them. That stopped him. Emily stepped closer, her fear finally becoming frustration. You called me your wife without permission. People started bowing. My necklace turned into some ancient signal. Now strangers are discussing my family like I am not standing here. So tell me what happens next. Alexander held her gaze. You choose. Emily blinked. Choose what? Whether you walk away from this room tonight or learn why your grandmother spent her life hiding that name. Before Emily could answer, Charles returned carrying a narrow wooden box covered in dust. He placed it carefully on a table and opened it. Inside rested a book bound in faded black leather. Alexander turned several brittle pages until he stopped. His eyes lifted slowly to Emily. Rose Veilheart, he read. Born 1948. Emily's breath caught. Then Alexander read the final line. His expression changed. Last registered guardian of the Queen's Covenant. The pendant against Emily's chest flashed silver. Across the room, the ancient crest answered. Lady Evelyn whispered. Then the bloodline did not disappear. Alexander closed the book. No, his crimson eyes settled on Emily. It was hidden. Hidden. The words settled over Emily more heavily than any royal title could have. Her grandmother had hidden an entire family history, and somehow Emily had carried its last surviving symbol through diners, overdue bills, crowded subway cars, and every ordinary day of her life without knowing what rested against her heart. Why? She asked. Alexander looked toward the old registry. That is the question we need to answer. Lady Evelyn moved closer to the table. The Queen's Covenant was not merely ceremonial. House Veilheart had the right to challenge royal decisions when human lives were involved. Emily looked at Alexander. Your decisions? The king's decisions, he corrected calmly. Including mine. That surprised her. So my family had power over vampires? Not power over us, Alexander said. A voice among us. He turned a page carefully. The covenant existed because centuries ago, one human woman convinced a vampire king that strength without accountability eventually becomes tyranny. Emily looked around the ballroom. Suddenly the frightened reactions made sense. Her pendant did not represent wealth. It represented authority. Jason gave another disbelieving laugh. This is unbelievable. She serves drinks for a living. Alexander slowly turned toward him. And you believe employment determines worth? Jason hesitated. That is not what I said. It is precisely what you have been saying all evening. Alexander's voice never rose. It did not need to. You mocked her because she works. You mocked her because she survived financial hardship. You treated kindness as weakness because you could not imagine giving anything without expecting repayment. Jason's face reddened. Emily watched Alexander carefully. She had expected anger from a king. Instead, she heard judgment without cruelty. Enough, Emily said softly. Alexander immediately stopped. Every vampire in the room noticed. So did she. He could command the entire ballroom, yet one word from her had made him silent. Emily turned to Jason. I spent years thinking you left because I was not successful enough. Maybe I needed tonight to understand something. Jason stared at her. Understand what? You measured my life by what I owned. She touched the pendant beneath her collar. I do not want to measure myself that way anymore. Jason glanced around the room, realizing there was no victory left for him here. He walked toward the exit without another word. Emily watched the doors close behind him. She expected satisfaction. What she felt instead was relief. Quiet. Clean. Final. Then Lady Evelyn spoke. Your Majesty, there remains the matter of your declaration. Emily closed her eyes briefly. Of course there did. Explain it, she said. Alexander faced her. By calling you my wife before witnesses of the night court, I invoked royal sanctuary. No council member can question, detain, or compel you while that protection remains. And how long does it remain? Alexander hesitated. Emily caught it. Alexander. Until midnight tomorrow. And then, Lady Evelyn answered. The declaration must either be formally withdrawn or presented before the council. Emily stared at her. Presented as what? Lady Evelyn's expression became almost reverent. A royal claim. Alexander's eyes flashed crimson. She is not property to be claimed. The room went silent again. He turned to Emily. Nothing happens without your consent. The pendant suddenly warmed beneath her fingers. This time Emily did not hide it. She drew it into the light. The silver glow spread across the stone, then narrowed into two distinct symbols. One was the Veilheart crest. The other was a crown. Charles Whitmore inhaled sharply. Lady Evelyn stepped back. That is impossible. Emily looked at Alexander. He appeared more shaken than anyone. What now? She asked. His answer came slowly. The pendant is not responding to your bloodline anymore. Emily's heartbeat quickened. Then what is it responding to? Alexander looked at the crown glowing beside the ancient crest. Me. For the first time that night, Alexander stepped away from Emily. Not because he feared her, because he feared what the symbol might mean. The silver crown on her pendant brightened, and the matching crest carved into the ballroom wall answered with a low shimmer. Lady Evelyn stared at it. The covenant recognizes him. Emily looked between them. I need that translated into normal English. Charles Whitmore carefully opened the registry again. There is an older passage. Alexander's expression hardened. Charles. She deserves to know. Emily looked directly at Alexander. He is right. Alexander became silent. Charles turned several fragile pages until he found a section written in faded ink. The Veilheart Guardian was never meant to serve the crown. The Guardian existed to judge whether the crown remained worthy of its authority. Emily frowned. And the second symbol? Charles hesitated. It appears only when the Guardian and the reigning monarch form what the old records call a voluntary royal bond. Emily almost laughed. We met twice. Exactly, Alexander said. His voice was colder now. Which means this cannot be treated as proof of anything. Lady Evelyn studied him. You know that is not entirely true. I know ancient magic has been misunderstood before. And I know, Emily interrupted, that everyone keeps talking about magic as though it gets to make decisions for me. Silence. Alexander looked at her, and something in his expression softened. It does not. Lady Evelyn seemed surprised. Your Majesty, tradition requires nothing from her. The authority in his voice returned, but this time it was aimed at the room, not Emily. If this pendant represents a covenant built upon human choice, then using it to remove hers would violate everything it stands for. Emily felt the strange pressure in her chest ease. She had spent the evening being called poor, single, insignificant, royal, protected, and possibly descended from some forgotten house. Alexander was the first person who had simply called her choice her own. She looked down at the glowing pendant. Why did my grandmother hide this? Charles examined the registry. Perhaps she was protecting you. From whom? Lady Evelyn's eyes moved toward the ballroom doors. From people who preferred the Queen's covenant forgotten. Alexander's gaze sharpened. Explain. Lady Evelyn took a slow breath. 217 years ago, House Veilheart did not simply disappear. The final guardian challenged the Night Council over laws governing humans. Shortly afterward, every public record of the family ended. Emily felt cold despite the warmth of the ballroom. You think they ran? I think, Lady Evelyn said carefully. Someone wanted history to believe they were gone. Alexander closed the registry. Then Rose Carter spent her life ensuring they succeeded. Emily touched the pendant. Suddenly, she remembered her grandmother's strange rule. Never take this off. Never sell it. And if anyone recognizes it, leave. She had thought it was the anxiety of an old woman who had lived through difficult years. Now the words sounded different. She warned me, Emily whispered. Alexander heard her. About the pendant? Emily nodded. She said if anyone ever recognized it, I should leave immediately. The silver light flickered. Then Charles looked toward the entrance. His expression changed. The ballroom doors had opened. 5 elegantly dressed figures stood beyond them, silent beneath the chandeliers. Every vampire nearby lowered their gaze. Lady Evelyn whispered, the Night Council. The oldest figure stepped forward. His attention moved past Alexander and settled directly on Emily. So, he said quietly, Rose Veilheart failed after all. Alexander moved between them. Choose your next words carefully. But Emily stepped out from behind him. Her hands were trembling. Her voice was not. No, she said. I think my grandmother succeeded. The councilman's expression did not change, but the silence around him did. Emily could feel it spreading through the ballroom, from the ancient vampires near the doors to the wealthy human guests who had no idea whether they should stay or quietly disappear. Your grandmother succeeded? The councilman repeated. Emily held the glowing pendant against her palm. She wanted me to have a life before anyone told me what I was supposed to become. His eyes narrowed. You know nothing about what you are. Then explain it. Alexander turned slightly toward her. Emily, you owe them nothing tonight. I know. She looked at him. That is why I am asking. The answer seemed to matter to him. He stepped aside, not abandoning her, giving her the room she had chosen. The councilman noticed. Interesting, he murmured. Alexander Blackwood has ruled for centuries, yet a waitress asks him to move and he moves. Emily's face warmed, but Alexander remained perfectly calm. A king who cannot step aside when another person deserves to speak is merely a man standing in everyone's way. Even Lady Evelyn looked surprised. The councilman's attention returned to the pendant. The Queen's covenant gave House Veilheart one privilege no human family possessed. Its guardian could stand before the Night Council without kneeling and question the crown without punishment. Emily glanced down at her black serving dress and worn shoes. An hour earlier, she had been carrying champagne. Now ancient vampires were discussing whether she could challenge a king. The absurdity almost made her smile. Then I have a question. The councilman frowned. For whom? Emily turned toward Alexander. His crimson eyes met hers. For the king. No one moved. When you called me your wife, did you know who my grandmother was? No. Did you know what the pendant was? I suspected its crest, but I was not certain. Did you say those words because of my bloodline? No. His answer came without hesitation. Emily swallowed. Then why? Alexander looked around the ballroom before returning his attention to her. Because a man was trying to convince you that being alone made you worth less. His voice softened. And for one reckless moment, I wanted him to understand how wrong he was. Emily almost forgot the council was there. That was still a terrible way to do it. A faint smile touched Alexander's face. Yes. A few guests seemed astonished that their king had admitted it. And tomorrow? Emily asked. You said the protection expires at midnight. Alexander nodded. Tomorrow I will withdraw the declaration if that is what you want. Lady Evelyn stepped forward. And the royal bond? A glowing stone does not make a marriage, Alexander said. Nor does an ancient law. His gaze remained on Emily. Choice does. The pendant suddenly grew warm again. Emily expected another burst of silver light. Instead, the glow became soft and steady. The councilman stared at it, then at Alexander. The Covenant heard you. Alexander looked almost annoyed by the observation. Emily nearly laughed. Outside, the November rain had softened against the windows. The gala felt different now, as though the entire room were waiting for a decision she was not ready to make. She removed the pendant and held it carefully. I am not becoming anyone's queen tonight. Good, Alexander said. Emily blinked. Good. You learned that your family history was hidden from you less than an hour ago. Anyone demanding a lifelong decision tonight would be a fool. For the first time all evening, Emily smiled. You are not what I expected a vampire king to be. You thought I was homeless. You refused my sandwich. It contained garlic. Emily stared at him. Alexander's expression remained perfectly serious. Then she laughed, and somehow the ancient ballroom became less frightening. She placed the pendant back around her neck. I want to know what happened to my grandmother's family. Alexander nodded. Then we begin there. He offered his hand, but this time he did not move it closer. He simply waited. Emily looked at the pale hand of a king who could command everyone in the room and had chosen not to command her. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. The pendant glowed once. Silver and crimson. Quiet. Certain. Alexander looked down at their joined hands. One more question, Emily said. Yes. If anyone asks tomorrow who I am, what are you going to tell them? His eyes lifted to hers. Emily Carter, he said, until you decide otherwise. And as the oldest vampires in New York watched the forgotten crest shine again, Emily finally understood why her grandmother had hidden the truth instead of choosing her future for her. Power could open doors. Destiny could place someone on the other side. But neither had the right to decide whether she walked through.